Cheers. Having not been on an overseas car launch for nearly 2 years, they've now come along like the proverbial London buses. Because while I was in Frankfurt last week testing the new Chevrolet Corvette Stingray, I'm now in Croatia testing what could be its perfect adversary, the new Ford Mustang GT. But it's not, because instead of having a 450 V8 under the bonnet in front of me, sending all its power to the rear wheels via a chunky 6-speed manual gearbox, I've got an electric motor in the back, electric motor in the front, combining to produce 487 horsepower that spreads all that power around all 4 wheels. Because this is the new Ford Mustang Mach-E GT. I know, it doesn't seem that long ago that we were putting the launch model of this Mach-E through its paces. And please scroll down, click love and subscribe my original film, especially if I rather like the ending I did. Anyway, once we got over the fact they were using the word Mustang for an SUV, we found an EV that was as good as anything in its class, if not better in many respects. And while we were driving it, never for a moment did I think that 351 horsepower wasn't enough. But obviously, Ford had other ideas. Now, as with all these car launches, a nice scenic route has been fed into our sat-nav, guiding us to a lovely lunch somewhere halfway around. But of course, unless you're a journalist writing your story, or perhaps someone that puts a phone on the top of a stick and waves it around a bit, in order to make a lovely film, what we need to do is to get off this main road, find a lovely scenic road with some twisting corners, and we go up and down it, up and down it, up and down it, dozens of times in order to create the film. The route we have today is 120 miles long. And the range, they promise, is about 280 miles. So it shouldn't be any problem at all. But I'm just starting to get a bit of range anxiety because we're in a foreign country. So just for a change, we're going to drive to the lunch point, and I'm going to have it in GT mode and drive like a GT car. Then when we get to the halfway point, I'll see how much miles we've got left, and then we'll start playing. So we start the day in whisper mode. The funny thing is all modes got the same power, so it's not as if you've got more acceleration. But what the modes do is they tighten things up, they stiffen the suspension slightly, they make the throttle more responsive, they make the steering more responsive. But it's pretty impressive as it is in whisper mode. So we'll pop up one mode now and try active mode. Active, please. Now, what do I feel? Oh, definitely when you first, the throttle is definitely more responsive. Brakes a bit harsher, turn in, good turn. Now the chassis is a bit more power going to the rear. The Magna-Ride suspension, trying to sort out 2 tons plus of car bouncing around. And you can't get away from the fact that it is a heavy vehicle, under braking. But the other thing we got here is bigger brakes over the standard Mach-E. Brembos. Right, let's go wild. Let's go Untamed. Get me Untamed, please. Can't feel that voice. Maybe I do. Just the rear slightly lighter. Turning in a bit more responsive. I've also got this overboost, which just flies up. We only have it for 5 seconds before the batteries heat up too much and it has to regen itself for another overboost session. We do have propulsion sound. Can you hear that? Can you hear that? Not a lot, no you can't, can you really? Well, it is there, honest. There's a sort of growl. The growl's behind me, which is a bit weird, but yeah, no, that's not doing much for me really. I think whatever mode you're in, understeer really is the order of the day. But there is an Untamed Plus, but it's all gone grey on me. It won't let me have it. And apparently if you're overheating your batteries or driving a bit too wild, it won't let you have it. It's actually for track work mainly. There's also a traction control button I can turn off. But to be honest, with this four-wheel drive, the big Pirelli tyres, I don't really think it would handle that much differently. It's more a worry of understeer. Oh, a little snap of the rear end there. I think we need to make these lunch stops more often. Cheers. Any water? I'm glad we stopped at lunchtime, because the promise of 280 miles has dropped to just 140 miles. So we've used 140 miles of range and only gone 70. So in 70 miles of GT driving with quite a lot of acceleration and throttle, we've actually lost almost half the range. So we've only got 50 miles left to get to the end of the day, but we've only got about 70 miles of range left. Whilst it has the promise of an extra 136 horsepower, the looks of the Mach-E GT is really very little different. But I do like the fact they've lost the Mexican moustache at the front to put a nice big faux grille on it, make it look like a powerful V8. But more importantly, there's this Magna-Rhine suspension that comes as standard that really helps sort out the chassis and the twisty bits. New Pirelli P0s, big 20-inch rims, all add to the extra grip factor. But how would I sum up this Mustang Mach-E GT? Well, it's not the sort of car you want to rush out onto a racetrack and join the 911s and Ferraris, but it is a GT you'd want to cruise across long distance of the continent. And of course, if you do that, you'll have the range it promised in the first place. But I wouldn't bother to take it to a racetrack. I'd probably just stick to the one basic mode, whisper. Whisper is all I want to do on a long, gentle journey. So, at the end of the day, the question is simply whether it's worth spending an extra £9,000 to upgrade from the extended range all-wheel drive first edition model that we drove previously and spend £67,000 on this better looking, better handling GT with an extra 130 horsepower. And surely the answer has to be yes.